Karley here. We had quite a good semester working on this, and of course many semesters before that. Karley's a wonderful student, and let's face it, she did a lot more work than I did, and I learned a lot from you. Thank you. But we had a lot of a good time putting this together. I've enjoyed your poetry and all the different events that you've done. You're going to be a sacrificial all the time for the slams as well, even so. But then having the poetry come together in the layout and design process was good, and I think it turned out really good. So I'm happy to hear. So Karley Schieffer's daughter of Dwayne and Ginger Schieffer is from the countryside outside Fort Dyce, Nebraska. She will graduate from Wayne State College in May of 2026 with a degree in English, writing, and literature with a minor in editing and publishing. Karley filled her time at Wayne State as she participated in the WSC marching band, wind ensemble, pep band, concert choir, honors program, Alpha Lambda Delta, Sigma Tau Delta, and the Philadelphian President's Honor Society. Served as President Sigma Tau Delta for 3 semesters and received the Alpha Acer Steele Burgess Poetry Prize, the Judas Guild Prize, for her work in the 2023-24 Judas Guild. She worked as a social media intern for the WSC School of Arts and Humanities for 2 years, judged competitive high school speech for 4 years, and worked as an academic library technician assistant for 4 years, and as a public library circulation assistant for 6 years. Following graduation, Karley intends to pursue a master's degree in library and information sciences. In her limited free time, she enjoys spending time with her loved ones and reading as much as possible. Please put your hands together for Karley.
Well, welcome to my honors presentation. Thank you, Chad, for that. The project specifically is titled Kiss the Grass, the Emotional Impact of Poetry from Genesis to Publication, but the work itself is Kiss the Grass, a collection of poetry. So a project summary of what all this entailed was researching poets and poetry to both learn poetic style, syntax, word choice, and theme, write and edit 30+ poems. The goal was to hit around 36 to 40 for this full-length collection. It ended up being 39. Create an order for the manuscript, format poems using Adobe InDesign, and create the cover using Adobe Express. And finalize the formatting and submit to Kindle Direct Publishing to self-publish the book. So to start off, it's a good idea to say what is poetry. I know it gets a lot of weird connotations with being emotional or very depressing, but there are specifics with it. So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines poetry as writing that formulates a concentrated imaginative awareness of experience in language chosen and arranged to create a specific emotional response through meaning, sound, and rhythm. The great poet William Wordsworth said that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. My personal definition is that poetry is verbalizing the human condition, articulating emotions to be better understood. So I'm taking a personal experience of mine or other people and using the best words and format possible to have you understand that exact experience. Also, my writing process, a lot of people have heard me said, is called throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping it sticks. So it's just a lot of trial and error, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. Why did I choose to do a collection of poetry? So my reasoning comes specifically first from what got me into poetry, which was high school competitive speech. I competed in oral interpretation of poetry, and I did end up creating what I didn't know was a chapbook, but actually was putting all of the books together, splicing the authors, and having a poem in there itself. So I ended up making a chapbook in high school before I even knew what it was. In college specifically, I took English 202 Intro to Poetry and English 402 Advanced Poetry workshops. And then also in tandem with those, I took English 221, 321, and 421, the editing and publishing classes, in which 3 of those chapbooks were made with first the poems from 202, 402, and then on the far end over there, short stories from my fiction workshops. I thought that the culmination of all of this had to be a full collection. It felt like the correct path for it forward, and it would end up with me taking poems from both before the workshops, during the workshops, and during the honors project, and creating a full-length collection. I did have the question from several honors students of why do creation rather than analysis of certain poets, because a lot of people are studying characters or different authors, and I do have a few reasons for that. I've always been a writer for the longest time, and I have the quote that I stand by, that if you can't find the exact book that you're looking for, even though I probably could find it for you, if you can't find it, you have to write it. So I decided to write my own book. I've always loved books. I'm your token librarian in the room. I love formatting and editing more than I probably should admit. During one of Chad's classes, I stayed for 4 hours after the class, lost in InDesign, and then came to, and it was real strange. I have always loved design and creation. You have probably seen a lot of the graphics or videos that I have done. I've also done t-shirts, posters, graphics, all of the things. So the intersection of all of those things ends up being a book. And I think it's a beautiful thing to take part in the act of creation, and to hold something you've made is just really, really lovely. So an overview of what this project was in its entirety. So first I'm going to go through the timeline of when all of this happened. Second is the research I did for this project in particular. Third is the writing and editing process. Fourth, formatting and design of the book itself. And fifth is publishing and the end product that we have. So here's the timeline for the research process, editing, writing, all of it is encompassed here. So the first poem in this book, both chronologically according to this and in the book itself, was written in May of 2021. So I think I was a junior in high school. And I brought it back to life, edited it, and it's now in the book as well. Then August to December of 2023 was my first intro to poetry workshop class. And then August to December of 2024 was advanced poetry. And then between that time was, I believe, English 221 and 321, so making those chapbooks as well. Then I did do something, having the first part of my honors project in January to May of 2025, and then skipping a semester and having the second part in January to May of 2026. So I did take a gap semester in that, which is not entirely common for honors projects. But what I did do is I started the research, I started and finished the research process in the first honors, kept writing through the gap semester, kept editing, and then finally came to this semester, honors 499. So January to May was most of the heavy lifting for this project. We finished editing of the poetry end of January, beginning of February, and then on February 13th, I locked myself in the library for a few hours and buffed out the book order for this. It's all very meticulously in order. From February 20th, we did all the formatting, which included putting all of the poems in InDesign, working with the margins, the front matter, all that good stuff. From March 31st to April 10th, we did the proofing. We proofed over and over again, which included us printing off some of our own here at college, and then also ordering proof copies from Amazon. So ordering the book, seeing what we liked and what we didn't, fixing, sending it off again. The book was officially published on Tuesday, April 21st. I did get the email the night before, right before my last choir concert, which was really, really weird, but it is live on Amazon. This has all led to the final presentation, in which there are 20 copies of my book here, if you would like to look at them. So I did want to show you first how much material the English curriculum here at college does cover. This is excluding any fiction. This is all of the poets that are studied here, at least in my time. And this includes specifically British Literature 2, American Literature 1, and American Literature 2. And for all of these, we studied at least 1 to 6 poems of all of them. So I did a lot of research just in the classes that were offered. Some of my favorite poets who I do take inspiration from or just genuinely enjoy include Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost, William Carlos Williams, E.E. Cummings, Sylvia Plath, and Nebraska native Ted Cruz. So onto the research I did in 395 in that first part of the semester. The poetry collections are what you think of when you think of poetry of actual authors' works. Craft books are what you think of when you're looking for how to write, inspiration for writing, studies on structure, syntax, all of those sort of things. So what I read for the poetry collections included The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman, Take Me With You and You Better Be Lightning by Andrea Gibson, Save Me an Orange by Haley Grace, I'm Alive, It Hurts, I Love It by Joshua Jennifer Espinosa, She Had Some Horses by Joy Harjo, 1,000 Mornings by Mary Oliver, Where Hope Comes From by Nikita Gill, Homebody and Milk and Honey by Ruby Kaur, and Dissolve by Sherman Mitsui. Of those that I did read, I would highly recommend the ones I have denoted. 1,000 Mornings, Where Hope Comes From, which is one of the reasons I decided to make my own poetry collection, and Milk and Honey. Of the craft books, these have all to do with specifically the design of books, but also on how to write poetry and all those things. We do use some of the Kim Adamazio books in our classes specifically. So I read The Design of Books by Debbie Byrne, On Poetry by Blaine Maxwell, The Poet's Companion and Ordinary Genius by Kim Adamazio, A Poetry Handbook by Mary Oliver, and Madness, Racket, Honey by Mary Ruffley. I will say of those, also denoted, On Poetry was wonderful, Ordinary Genius, and A Poetry Handbook, and I do honestly think one of my favorite books of all time, regardless, is The Essays of Madness, Racket, Honey, so I would highly recommend those. I did also have the questions of inspiration versus method of where does your poetry come from? I'd say there are two specific camps that some people come from, which is people who say there's like divine intervention or muses or just comes out of thin air, and then there's the creative method and practice of it all. So over centuries of writing, I know a lot of poets are like, it's from the divine, it's from a muse, don't give the credit to me, that kind of thing. And a lot of my poetry does come to me in the quiet. I would say the best way to pull anything out of thin air is to turn my phone off and chuck it out the window. My brain is usually pulled in 10 different directions, but when it's not driving, in the shower, that kind of stuff, where it's just quiet, that's when stuff will just come out. There's also the methodical part of writing, which is the practice. Writing is like practicing any skill, and a lot of writers swear by writing every day, reading every day, that kind of thing. There are a lot of incredible exercises in the books that I did have up there. The repetition gets the practice in your head and keeps these ideas more constant, makes you think about formatting, syntax, word choice. It's kind of in the back of your brain all the time. This leads to two things that I put up here. Well, the processing and coping of writing, which I'll get to in a second, but beating the dead horse and what I call emotional bastardization. Apologies. At a certain point, the practice gets to be a lot, especially in 395 when you're going, oh, I want to try to write a lot a couple times every day, to I want to try to write a poem every day, to I want to try to write a poem every week, and it slowly falls off a little bit. It's hard to keep up the practice because you sometimes need to take a break. That point usually comes when I'm at work and I start alphabetizing books before bed, or I realize all my dreams last week were set to marching music. So I would recommend it. Another problem I found is what I've coined emotional bastardization. It's a certain weirdness that can only come from the strain of creation and writing all the time, which a lot of people don't have experience with. When you're using a medium like I do of emotional autobiographical poetry, a lot of your fodder comes from personal experience and experiencing life, the good and the bad. And I found if you're thinking about writing all the time and you're too stuck in your brain, in any situation, instead of processing the events through poetry, you sit there in the event and you go, how can I use this? Instead of actually taking it in. So I would say you need to take a step back. And it's not a good practice, but you need to take a step back, take a breath, and just keep going. But I will say a lot of the poetry, because it's autobiographical, it does come from processing events and processing different sorts of things and coping. So the writing itself. This is all of the poetry, which is crazy to look at. But I would say I went into the writing process for this book with about 15 poems written from either before or during the workshops. That's about 1/3 of the book. They were either fully edited or I edited them into this with the writing process. I knew that they would fit in what I wanted the collection to be, so I just kind of took those vibes and carried on through it with more of the writing process. If you would ask me about genre or style, I would say autobiographical, confessional poetry, and free verse. I'm not huge into rhyming. I look to Robert Frost a lot for flow and conversational style. Most of these, I hope it just feels like I'm talking to you or somebody is talking to you. For style, I will try to explain to the non-writers in the room. I use a lot of enjambment, which is when you break sentences and move things around for different flow of things. A lot of capitalization and italics for emphasis, indentation, spacing, and line breaks. And also a big thing is that a lot of these do not have titles. I know it looks like there's titles up there, but a lot of these are just the first sentence or a part of it that is put up there as the table of contents. And I did get a lot of crap for that from Chad and from Dr. Marcellus. Not a lot, but some. But it's hard with the formatting when you don't have titles on some and some on the others, but I think it is there for a purpose. All of the things in poetry are very intentional. The capitalization, the indentation, all of the titles. They're there for a reason. So them not having a title says something about that poem. There are 39 total poems in this collection, broken into 3 sections of 13, and the order that it is put in is also very meticulous, as I previously mentioned. It's to have them flow together and try to create a certain story. I also didn't start off with a specific theme for the book. I didn't also end with a theme as much as I kind of found a common thread throughout it. As it is autobiographical, it does use a lot of memories and timeline for a kind of storyline. And when I went through to make the order and try to find single words to encompass them and try to figure it out, I did come through with a few that repeated pretty often. Identity, family, perception, grief and worry, femininity, and music. A lot of people know here that I've been in music all of college and a lot of my life, and it is a big part of a lot of this. So while I was creating these poems and editing, I kind of ended up listening to a lot of the same music that fit the vibe of the poetry, and what actually ended up happening is I had 39 songs that I listened to on repeat and turned into a playlist. And if you would like, if you're on Spotify or Apple Music, why did it do that? Oh, I opened up my playlist on Apple Music. Whoops. Stop it. It is a playlist, as you can see there. If it will let me present, my apologies. There we go. So if you do want the music, it's right there. If you want to think of the vibe of this book, it's kind of the intersection between Noah Kahn, Hosier, and being a woman. But I do recommend it. It's some of my favorite music, and you're welcome to listen to it. It also does have some like Simon Garfunkel on there, if you like that. But I had a lot of fun making it, and it does line up with the poetry if you ever do choose to read it and see how it goes. I also write a lot about nature. I do love writing about nature. I think the background of most of this is very rural, very Nebraska. I love Nebraska. And also there's a lot of imagery of water and trees, which does lead me into the formatting and design of the actual book. So this photo specifically, minus the gradient in the back that was added in later, but the photo is actually taken from below, down by the marching field, the practice field. And I really like it. I'm looking up at the trees. I have a really good John Green quote. To me, to sit beneath a ginkgo and look up is to be reminded that we're a blip in the story of life, but also what a blip. We are not observers of life on Earth as much as it may sometimes feel that we are. We are participants in that life, so trees don't just remind me how astonishing they are, they also remind me how astonishing we are. I love John Green a lot. But the inside of the book was specifically made with Adobe InDesign. The outside, though Canva is my great love, the outside was made with Adobe Express so that it would transfer better over with the Adobe. And then this entire presentation is on Canva. Some of the things that you normally don't think about on the inside of the book that editors more so understand are all of the front matter, back matter, anything that's before the first part of the book, anything that's after, half title, title page, copyright page, table of contents, all of the poetry in the actual sections, the acknowledgments, and the author bio. But this back specifically gave us the most trouble of seeing where the spine would be and the spacing, but I think it turned out pretty all right. So publishing. This book is on Amazon, which is absolutely crazy to say. I can't believe that's here in my hands. When I first got the first copy, I was like, oh my god. The question of, did I want this officially published? No, I did not want to publish this book. I'm not the best slam poet, and I have the belief that my poetry is more so not meant for air, but for hands. And I really like that line. So I really wanted the physical book. And I could have done this as a chapbook and printed it off and not released it into the ether. I am, however, incredibly lucky to have so many people who want this book to exist. Sorry. So I did decide to self-publish it. If you ask me if I wanted to publish again, the answer is also no. This was a long process, but it did teach me a lot. Whew. I'm glad I did it though. It taught me a lot about the writing process, the editing process, the design, publishing, and how much I could actually achieve. But the QR code does work. I tested it, so. But that's what I have. I didn't know if I wanted to do a poetry reading, depending on how time was. Looks like I'm doing okay. So I will read one poem very quickly. It's been a long week. I'm going to read quick on page 49, Made Well. My voice was made for libraries and churches and showers. Libraries, quiet whispers for children, and even quieter breaths between shelves. Churches, perfect tone for hymns and imperfect tone for prayer, as they prefer. Showers, melodies made to be washed down the drain in a more sincere voice than the real world. My body was made for forests and rivers and bed sheets. Forests, arms wrapped around trees and toes splayed in grass, roots burrowing from both. Rivers, cold muddy ankles and shoulder skin with smooth speckled stones. Bed sheets, pillows, greased skin and taut muscles relaxing, finally winding down. My mind was made for paper and music and poem. Paper, sprawled thoughts and tangled ideas laid waste haphazardly. Music, dissected melodies and mismatched rhythms found only in muscle memory. Home. Hands to grasp in comforting silence, but has never felt lonely. I was made for the sky and the plains and the ground. The sky, the first sun and last moon as my witness. The plains, my first home, my first love, my first loss. The ground, the weight beneath and the gravity above, my last rest made well.